Namaste. Good evening. So once again, I welcome you to this Friday study class, which is very important because we study mostly the Mahatma letters. And as you all know, Vibhaji had already taken the part 1 of the chronological letter number 46, which is ML-12, Mahatma letters 12. So she will take up the part 2 of the letter, and she already has the slides and she will take portions from there. Before she starts a presentation and deliberation, let us do the invocation, universal prayer, followed by 1 minute silence. O hidden life, vibrant in every atom. O hidden light, shining in every creature. O hidden love, embracing all in oneness. May each who feels himself as one with thee know he is also one with every other. Come back. So I don't think Vibhaji needs an introduction. We all know she's a wonderful speaker. She's a recent national lecturer. She has been talking about Mahatma letters and secret doctrine and many other serious topics. And she's good at explaining difficult themes to simplified versions for a common man's understanding. So I think that is her introduction. She simplifies things for us. So let us hear out the ML-12 part 2 from her presentations and whatever she has prepared for us today. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, SUVRALINA. Namaste and good evening to all of you. So we have been studying this Mahatma letter number 46 in the chronological series, which is the Mahatma letter number 12 in the 80 Barker series. And we have already completed in our last session, we studied about the earth chain. The earth is septenary and its globes, they exist on the Buddhic plane, the mental plane, the astral plane, and the physical plane. And how after 7 rounds, there is a planetary pralay. So now we will continue further after that. And I would like to share the slides, which are for the remaining part of the letter. So we will complete this letter today. Okay, so in this letter, we have seen how these globes, the septenary earth, how the first globe and the last globe, they are on the Buddhic plane. This was the diagram from Secret Doctrine. Then the next globe was on mental plane, the globe C on astral, and the physical earth, that is globe D, on the physical plane. And then again, higher ascending, globe E on the astral, globe F on the mental, and globe G again on the Buddhic plane. To simplify this, this is the diagram, globes A, B, C, D, descending arc, and D, E, F, G, the ascending arc. And we have seen that as the life wave continues from globe A to B, the globe A will go into obscuration, or it becomes dormant. So in one round, as the life wave proceeds across these globes, the previous globe will become dormant. But in the 7th round, when the life wave will proceed from globe A to B, then the globe A will start disintegrating. So that was the beginning of planetary pralay. And when the life wave reached the last globe, then the entire humanity, which is evolving on the septenary earth, they will have reached the state of Buddhahood and they will pass into Nirvana. So this will happen in the 7th round after the globe G is, the cycle of globe G is complete. And also all these 7 globes, they will be disintegrated and the earth chain will go into planetary pralay. So we saw how the planetary pralay takes place, and for that we took this example of the lunar chain. The lunar chain is going into planetary pralay, and one by one each globe of the lunar chain has transmitted all its principles to a live center where our new earth chain was formed. So this is how a chain goes into planetary pralay, and the same will happen with earth chain also after the 7 rounds are over. So now we will continue further. This was our last slide, which we have done last time, that planetary development is also as progressive as the human or race evolution. So how human beings are evolving on all these globes, and on each globe they pass or they cycle through 7 races. Similarly, the development of earth or the progress of earth is also happening, and at the time of pralay all the forces, the spiritual forces, they are maintained status quo. So this has been compared to a timepiece or a clock that has been stopped. And after the pralay, the cycle will commence on a higher chain. Now we move to the next part of the letter. And in this, Mahatma M writes to AP Senate that at the coming of the pralay, no human, animal, or even vegetable entity will be alive to see it. Now, why they will not be alive? Because in the 7th round, on the 7th globe, all these beings will have completed their 7 cycles of evolution and they will pass into nirvana. But there will be the earths or the globes with their mineral kingdoms, and all these planets will be physically disintegrated in the pralay, yet not destroyed. For they have their places in the sequence of evolution, and their privations coming again out of the subjective, they will find the exact point from which they have to move around the chain of manifested form. So this is exactly what we were talking about right now, that in the 7th round, these globes, they will get physically disintegrated, but they will not be destroyed. The cosmic atoms, we mentioned about this, the cosmic atoms, they will remain in a differentiated state, meaning that the Pancha Mahabhut, which constitute the form of the globe or the form of the beings, they remain in a differentiated state. The Pancha Mahabhut are Akash, Vayu, Agni, Jal, and Prithvi. So these tattva or these cosmic elements will remain, because this is a planetary pralay. If there are higher cycles of pralay, like the solar pralay or the universal pralay, in which these cosmic elements are also absorbed back into their source. So the Prithvi Tattva will get absorbed back in the Jal Tattva. The Jal Tattva gets absorbed back in Agni, which is absorbed into Vayu, which is again absorbed into Akash. So that the absorption or the dissolution of the cosmic elements, that happens at a higher level of pralay, which is the cosmic pralay. But at the planetary level or a planetary pralay, these cosmic elements, they remain. Only the physical form of the globe or the chain, that gets disintegrated. So then he talks about privation. So privations coming out again of the subjective. Privation means that the globes which are there, the globes of the earth, they are bereft of their objectivity. They are not in objective existence. They are in subjective form. Their essence still exists. The essence is not lost. So that is the privation which will come out of the subjective state when the time for the next chain to commence will begin. So their evolutionary progress will not be lost. Then after the period of rest, when the dawn of activity of the new chain arrives, all these uh, all these privations of the globe, which are there in subjective form, they will emerge back into objectivity and manifest a higher chain. Their evolutionary progress will continue from exactly the same point that they had reached just before they were absorbed into pralay. The next point, this, as you know, is repeated endlessly throughout eternity. Each man of us has gone through this ceaseless round and will repeat it forever and ever. The deviation of each one's course and his rate of progress from nirvana to nirvana is governed by causes which he himself creates out of the exigencies in which he finds himself entangled. So this cycle of manifestation and dissolution, which we call Srishti and Pralay, it continues. It has no beginning and no end. There will be cycle after cycle. And each one of us, we go through these cycles and we will continue to do so forever. But not on the same level. We will evolve increasingly on higher levels. In fact, we can see a glimpse of the first great truth in this statement which Mahatma Ji has mentioned. And that first great truth we have read in Idol of the White Lotus. The meaning of that is that man's soul, it is immortal. And the future of that soul is a growth of the thing whose splendor has no limit. So growth and splendor of the soul has no limit. It will continue. And this is exactly what he's saying here, that these cycles have no ending. They have no beginning and no end. And they will keep evolving on a higher scale. So as they will evolve on a higher scale, the soul of man will also continue to grow. Its growth and splendor will have no limit. This state of pralay, that is the pralay can be whether at planetary level, at solar level, or universal level. So this state of pralay is basically the nirvanic state for the human soul. Because in this state, the soul remains in blissful rest for a duration which is corresponding to the planetary cycle or the solar cycle or the universal cycle. So for equivalent duration, it will remain in blissful rest. That is the state of nirvana. Now, if a person achieves this nirvana in his current birth itself, currently we are in our fourth round, and this is the fourth globe, and we are the fifth root race. So instead of continuing into the next round, that is the sixth round and the seventh round, if we are able to achieve this nirvana in the current race, in the current birth, then we will not incarnate on this earth chain. But after the earth chain is absorbed, that means after the planetary pralay of the earth, then on a future chain at a higher level, our growth will continue. So this is the meaning of nirvana. We can attain nirvana right here, right now, or in any case, it will happen at the end of the seventh round. Now, how soon or how delayed the person can achieve nirvana? It is determined by his karma, which he himself generates. His karma is in his hands. Based on his circumstances, his experiences, and his choices, he is creating his own karma. If he works in a way, his nirvana can be attained right now, or he can continue up to the seventh round. He deviates from the path, and due to this, nirvana gets delayed. Now, path simply means what actions the man should perform. His action should be in harmony with the laws of the universe. They should be in consonance with the laws of nature. So his spiritual progress, this determines his nirvana. And if his actions are not commensurate with these laws, then his nirvana gets delayed. So this is what nirvana can be hastened by following spiritual discipline and sadhana. And as this letter clearly mentions that ordinarily all humanity by the end of the seventh round will attain nirvana. Then again in the next cycle, man will evolve through another chain at a higher level. And depending on his karma, he can attain this nirvana at any moment or at the end of this cycle. So in every cycle, man's rate of evolutionary progress from nirvana to nirvana is governed by himself. Further, Mahatma Ji mentions that this picture of an eternity of action. Why eternity of action? Because that cycle continues, the cycle of manifestation of higher and higher chains. So it continues. So it is an eternal cycle without beginning or end. That is why this is a picture of eternity of action. This may appall the mind that has been accustomed to look forward to an existence of ceaseless repose, but their concept is not supported by the analogies of nature, nor, and ignorant though I may be thought of your Western science, may I not say by the teachings of that science. So see here, Mahatma Ji is talking to AP Senate. He is from Europe. And what Mahatma Ji is referring here is the Western minds. So in the Western minds, generally and typically speaking about the Christian thought, their belief is that man lives only one life and he is rewarded with eternal heaven if he has lived a good life, or if he has lived an evil life, then he will be condemned to eternal hell. So this was the Christian thought. Of course, now it is changing. Many of them started believing in reincarnation. But during that period, this was the general thought of the Western mind. They believed in one life, and according to the life lived, there was either eternal heaven or eternal hell. But here, ancient wisdom is telling us that the evolution continues ceaselessly in cycles. And after every cycle, whether it's a big cycle or a small cycle, that means planetary or solar system or universal, there is a period of rest for the evolving soul. And after that period of rest, again, that soul will evolve on higher level. So obviously, this kind of a thought will be appalling to the Western mind because they think there is eternal rest after one life. This idea of eternal cycle of activity and repose, this seems very horrifying to the Western mind because it is in contrast to their idea of eternal heaven or rest after one life. But in nature also we find the analogies in nature, they also don't support this idea. And also the contemporary science doesn't support. We have seen that all around nature, we can see there are cycles of season, there are cycles of day and night, cycles of sleeping and waking. So we can easily draw analogy that the same should hold good for man also. The next point, we know that periods of rest, periods of action and rest follow each other in everything in nature, from the macrocosm with its solar system down to man and its parent earth, which has its seasons of activity followed by those of sleep, and that in short, all nature, like her begotten living forms, has her times for recuperation. So Mahatma Ji is giving the same example in nature, what we can see. A period of rest after a period of activity, that is like a reward or a time to recuperate and rejuvenate for the next cycle of activity. It is very true. If we are not able to sleep properly in the night, then in the next day, we are not fresh, we are not rejuvenated and prepared for the next day's activity. So that rest period, it acts like a reward. And this process holds good at all levels, as we said, universal, solar system or earth, in all of nature, including man and other living forms. So we have seen that one example which comes to my mind, that even in our daily activities or life activities, like in ancient times, the farmers, they realized that the soil also needed rest. They carried on agriculture and they grew crops. But when they grow crops over and over again, the soil is depleted of its nutrients. So that soil needs to be rested. So what they would do, they would grow the crops by rotation. They would plow two fields and sow the crop only in one field. The other field they left fallow. And the field that was left fallow, it would regenerate. There would be aeration of soil because it has been plowed, nitrogen fixation, and the soil is replenished so that in the next season that soil can be used and the previous field is left fallow. So you see this period of rest and period of activity, it applies everywhere in nature. And like this, all of nature is following this periodic cycle of action and rest. Further, Mahatmaji has mentioned, so with the spiritual individuality, whatever the cyclic period we have seen in all of nature, the same thing holds good for spiritual individuality, the monad, which starts on its downward and upward cyclic rotation. The periods which intervene between each great Manvantarian round are proportionately long to reward for the thousands of existences passed on various globes, while the time given between each race birth or rings, as you call them, is sufficiently lengthy to compensate for any life of strife and misery during that lapse of time passed in conscious bliss after the rebirth of the ego. See here, Mahatmaji has referred to two terms, the monad and the ego. Now, monad, we all know from our theosophical literature, monad is Atma Buddhi and ego is Atma Buddhi Manas. Okay, so Atma Buddhi, which are the universal principles, and ego, which is Atma Buddhi Manas, it is the reincarnating ego, the human ego or the real man. And these are all, they are nothing, they are aggregates or groups of human principles. We have studied human constitution, we have 7 principles. So these are the higher 3. The higher 3, which becomes the reincarnating ego, Atma Buddhi Manas, and the even higher one, only the first 2, which is Atma Buddhi. That is being referred as spiritual individuality. So both these groups of human principles, they also undergo their own cycle of activity and rest. That means monad has his cycle of activity and rest. Similarly, the human ego also has its period of activity and rest. Now let us see about the monad. This is a new term, spiritual individuality. I have not come across it anywhere in the theosophical literature. Perhaps someone of you may have read it. And here clearly monad is being termed as spiritual individuality. Even though Atma Buddhi are universal principles, so we really need to understand what is meant by spiritual individuality. Spiritual individuality simply means the monad which has assimilated the essence of a particular causal body. Causal body is when we speak of Atma Buddhi Manas, the human ego. So that Manas, it is the higher Manas which has assimilated with the Buddhi. That is the causal body. And monad, it has only Atma Buddhi. It doesn't have that Manas part. But the essence of that Manas or the causal body has already been assimilated in the Buddhi. So that is what makes this spiritual individuality unique. The experiences which the monad has gathered through that causal body in all its cycles of incarnation. That is what defines spiritual individuality. It may not be very easy to grasp this idea. It needs some contemplation. How the monad goes through the ascending and descending arc, and how in each incarnation the causal body is gathering experience. So, coming back to this monad, which is termed as spiritual individuality, in every round, this monad is moving through the ascending and descending arc. And this happens cyclically for 7 rounds, thus completing the great Manvantar or the entire earth chain. For 7 rounds, monad is continuously going through this cycle. After the 7 rounds are complete, there is a period of rest or nirvana. So that is the state of rest for the monad. It is his reward for the innumerable existences lived on different globes during the 7 rounds. After this rest or nirvana, the monad will commence its cycle on a higher chain. And just like the monad, the ego too. Now, ego is a smaller cycle. Ego is Atma Buddhi Manas. So, the ego too has its periods of activity and rest. So, what is the cycle of the ego? Activity and rest. The ego undertakes the cycle of reincarnation through all 7 root races on a globe, on every globe, on all 7 globes, it has to pass through these 7 cycles. So after each life on the globe, now each life meaning like our life, we have one life from birth to physical death. So after each life on the globe, the ego will spend a duration in Devachan. Right? We know the after death states. After death, what happens? The ego is in a gestation state for a while and then goes into Devachanic state. The duration in Devachanic state, it is proportionate to the good karma generated in that earth life. Whatever were the good karma of man in that particular life, equivalent Devachanic period is there, which is the period of rest for the ego, Atma Buddhi Manas. And after that period, the ego is reincarnated in a new personality. So that period of rest in Devachan, that is what it compensates for all the miseries or whatever the ego might have undergone during the lifetime. This Devachanic period is considered as rebirth of ego. That is what Manmaji has mentioned. Time passed in conscious bliss after the rebirth of ego. Why it is called rebirth? Because as I told you that after physical death, the ego, it separates from the astral body and it goes into gestation. After a while, this astral body or the calm roop, it will disintegrate, and then this ego, it will awaken again into this state of higher bliss. So after the astral body disintegrates, then it will awaken again. The ego will awaken again. So it was in gestation and then it awoke again. So that is called the rebirth of ego into Devachanic state. Next point. To conceive of an eternity of bliss or woe, and to offset it to any conceivable deeds of merit or demerit of a being who may have lived a century or even a millennium in flesh, can only be proposed by one who has never yet grasped the awful reality of the word eternity, nor pondered upon the law of perfect justice and equilibrium which pervades nature. Now, an eternity of bliss or sorrow based on deeds of one lifetime, this idea is quite misconceived. Those who believe in it, they have not clearly understood the meaning of eternity. This is what Mahatma M is saying. What is the meaning of eternity? In the Western thought, the term eternity means forever and ever, without end. But in theosophical literature, eternity means lasting throughout a cycle or throughout a round. Even though this period of round, it may seem interminably long to us, but still it is a limited period. The activity is limited and it will come to an end. It is also called Manvantar. So because it is interminably wrong, that is why it is called eternity. And during a Manvantar, man follows his evolutionary path on all the 7 globes. Then cyclically, he enters periods of activity and periods of rest. He will create the causes and he will reap their effects. This whole evolutionary journey, it unfolds in accordance with the universal law of justice and equilibrium. The law of cause and effect, or the law of karma. And this law, it restores everything in the universe to harmony or equilibrium. So if this equilibrium is disturbed, obviously the effects will be generated such that harmony or equilibrium is restored again. Now, because of this cycle, man always has a chance to perform karma in his next cycle. So he has a chance to redeem himself by performing good karma in the next cycle of activity. Therefore, the concept of eternal hell or eternal heaven, it does not hold good, because man can always do a course correction. If he has not led a good life, in his next cycle, he can always generate good karma. Then Mahatmaji tells in it that further instructions may be given you, which will show how nicely justice is done, not to man only, but also his subordinates, and throw some light, I hope, upon the vexed question of good and evil. So here Mahatma Ji is speaking about the possibility of giving further instructions to Senate about how the law of justice works. Now we know that man is responsible for the choices he makes. He creates his causes and he is solely responsible for the effects that accrue. But are the lower kingdoms responsible for their actions? Ordinarily not. But then how this law of justice works in the lower kingdoms, that means mineral, plant, and animals. And also what constitutes good and evil. So Mahatma Ji is telling that all these instructions, they may be given to Senate. They may come his way. And when he says about the vexed question of good and evil, so he has not given details in this letter, but in letter number 88, that is chronological letter 88, there Mahatma Ji has given in detail their views on what is evil. So if we have time today, maybe we can touch a little bit on that, the question of evil. And in the last point, he says, and now to crown this effort of mine of writing, I may as well pay an old debt and answer an old question of yours concerning earth incarnation. So this, we know from the beginning of these letters that Mahatma M's letter, from his letter, that Mahatma M was not particularly fond of writing letters. It was actually Mahatma KH who was generally corresponding with Senate, answering his questions. And Senate had been very sincere in his approach to the masters. He had also greatly helped in furthering the cause of the Theosophical Society. Therefore, Mahatma M wanted to repay this debt to Senate. And also Mahatma KH had to attend to some other pressing duty the previous day. So he could not answer Senate's letter, and therefore Mahatma M has pitched in and he is writing these answers to Senate. Senate had asked about the earth incarnations, and now Mahatma M was answering them. And there is also some light-hearted exchange between the two Mahatmas, Mahatma KH and M. Mahatma KH told Mahatma M that Senate had to waste a lot of time in trying to read his letters because they were written in such scrawlings. So jokingly, Mahatma M is now writing to Senate that Mahatma KH's rebuke, it struck home, and now he has amended his evil ways. So he's trying to write neatly. But of course, we know that these letters are not written by hand by the Mahatmas themselves. They are precipitated by some occult process. So after this, Mahatma M speaks about what the Western science postulates in terms of the people who have, or the races which have evolved on the earth. So that is, he uses the term ethnography and other matters. Ethnography is basically the scientific study or the scientific description about how the people of different cultures, their customs, their habits, and also their differences, how they have evolved. So all this he is mentioning with respect to the root races and sub races which we study in theosophy. And now what Western science has to say about that, that has been written in the letter. But he says that there are very few ideas which are barely approximating the truth. And except for one point, they are all wrong. So all the ideas of the Western science which are written in the letter, I have not included them in the slide because he says that except for one point, they are all wrong. So he explains to Senate what is wrong in that. He says that with one solitary exception, they are all wrong. They come near enough, yet miss the mark in every case. There were not 4 but 5 races, and we are that 5th, the remnant of the 4th. A more perfect evolution or race with each Mahacyclic round. While the first race appeared on Earth not 500,000 of years ago, that is Fiske's theory, but several million. So what he had written about the Western science, the ideas of that, Western science had postulated that 4 races evolved on Earth. And the first race evolved about 500,000 years. That means 5 lakh years ago. But Mahatma M says that this is not right, and he corrects this misconception. He says that there were 5 races up till now, and we are the present 5th race, which evolved from the remnants of the 4th race. So now we know that how the races evolve. Every next root race will evolve from the corresponding sub-race of the previous root race. So if we are the 5th root race, that means we have evolved from the 5th sub-race of the 4th root race. So previous root race and the corresponding sub-race. The 4th root race was the Atlantean race, and most of them, they perished in the last great cataclysm when the island of Atlantis, it sank into the ocean. And very few remaining Atlanteans of its 5th subrace, they evolved into the 5th or the Aryan root race. So this present evolution on the 4th globe, that is our physical earth, this is in the 4th round. In every round or Mahacycle, the evolution of the races happens similarly. The races increasingly progress towards perfection with each round. Mahatmaji also mentions that the first root race, it appeared on the face of this earth several million years ago, and not 500,000 years. That is Fiske's theory. So he says that first root race appeared several million years ago. The latest scientific theory is that of the German and American professors who say, through Fiske, we see man living on the earth for perhaps 500,000 years, to all intents and purposes dumb. This person, Fiske, John Fiske, he was an American who popularized the European theory of evolution in USA. And this above statement of his, that we see man living on earth, this statement, it was published in an article. There was a magazine which was the Atlantic Monthly. So it was published in that magazine in May 1882. So further about that statement, what Mahatmaji says, he says that he is both right and wrong. Right about the race having been dumb, for long ages of silence were required for the evolution and mutual comprehension of speech, from the moans and mutterings, from the first remove of man above the highest anthropoids, up to the first monosyllable uttering man. But he is wrong in saying all the rest. And this anthropoid, it is a race now extinct, since nature shuts the door behind her as she advances in more than one senses. So Mahatmaji is referring to the statement made by Fiske. He says he is right about man being dumb during his early evolution, because that was the time when man was only one step higher than this ape-like man, the highest anthropoid. So he was only one step higher than that ape man. And those ape men are now extinct. All that man could do at that time was make sounds of moaning and muttering. There was no intelligible speech. And even to come to the first single syllable speech, it took long ages. Long ages were required to progress from that first monosyllable speech that could be mutually understood by men. So therefore, that period in which man was dumb, that is true as far as Fiske's statement is concerned. Now, this is the last slide. And here Mahatmaji is concluding the letter. So he says that, by the by, you ought to come to some agreement as to the terms used when discussing upon cyclic evolutions. Our terms are untranslatable, and without a good knowledge of our complete system, which cannot be given except to regular initiates, would suggest nothing definite to your perception, but only be a source of confusion, as in the case of the term soul and spirit, with all your metaphysical writers, especially the spiritualists. So this is very true. We need to have a common vocabulary and to be able to exchange ideas meaningfully. The terms used in the trans-Himalayan esoteric schools, or even many terms from the Sanskrit literature, they do not have equivalent English terms. And in trying to convey an idea in a different language, many times its meaning is lost. But even more dangerous is that incorrect meaning is interpreted, which leads to confusion. And this was especially the case with spiritualists. They often used the terms like soul and spirit, they were used interchangeably. They were supposed to mean one and the same thing, whereas that is not the case. So, soul, we know that we refer to it as Atma Buddhi Manas, and spirit is Atma. So, to avoid any such confusion, Mahatmaji is advising Synod to agree on some common terms. Even the vocabulary where it says the rounds and the chains, many times it is referred to as Manvantar or a Mahayog or a Yug. So there needs to be clarity on the period of these cycles, rings, rounds, and chains. Then at the end, Mahatmaji mentions to Synod, you must have patience with Subbarao. Give him time. He is now at his tapas and will not be disturbed. I will tell him not to neglect you, but he is very jealous and regards teaching an Englishman as a sacrilege. Now, Subbarao was a chela of Mahatma M, and Mahatma M and HPB had asked him to provide these teachings to Synod. But Subbarao was a staunch Vedantist. He was a brilliant Advait Vedantist, and he was a strict Brahmin. He considered that imparting these sacred teachings to a Westerner was a violation of those teachings. It was considered a sacrilege because those teachings were sacred, sacred wisdom. And why it was considered a sacrilege? Because those Western people, they didn't follow the required spiritual discipline. So he was hesitant. He did not want to do that work. But even so, Mahatma M, he assured Synod that he will receive the instructions, and he will tell Subbarao not to neglect him. But currently, Subbarao was practicing some tapas and he was undergoing some spiritual austerities. So Synod had to be patient. So with this, the letter is completed that Mahatma M had written to AP Synod, and it has been a very informational and useful letter to us also. So I will stop sharing the screen now, and I will request Meenakshi ji to give us the translation in Hindi.
नमस्ते, थैंक यू सिस्टर। आज हम महात्मा लेटर नंबर 46 का के कंटिन्यूएशन में ले रहे हैं। महात्मा एम कहते हैं, सीनेट से कहते हैं, प्रलय के आगमन पर उसे देखने के लिए कोई भी मानव, पशु या यहाँ तक कि वनस्पति भी जीवित नहीं होगी, लेकिन उनके खनिज वर्गों के साथ पृथ्वी या ग्लोब्स होंगे, और ये सभी ग्रह प्रलय में भौतिक रूप से विघटित हो जाएंगे, फिर भी नष्ट नहीं होंगे, क्योंकि विकास क्रम में उनका अपना स्थान है और उनका अभाव फिर से अव्यक्तता से व्यक्त रूप लेगा। वे ऐसा सटीक बिंदु पाएंगे जहां से उन्हें प्रकट रूपों की श्रृंखला में चक्रवत आगे बढ़ना है। यह अनंतता में अंतहीन रूप से दोहराया जाता है। हम में से प्रत्येक व्यक्ति इस निरंतर दौर से गुजरता है और इसकी हमेशा के लिए पुनरावृत्ति होगी। प्रत्येक के मार्ग का परिवर्तन और निर्वाण से निर्वाण तक उसकी प्रगति की दर उन कारणों के अधीन होती है जिन्हें वह स्वयं उन अनिवार्य आवश्यकताओं से उत्पन्न करता है, जिनमें वह स्वयं को उलझा हुआ पाता है। गतिविधि की अनंतता की यह तस्वीर उस मन को चकित कर सकती है जो निरंतर विश्राम के जीवन की प्रतीक्षा करने का आदी हो चुका है, लेकिन उनकी संकल्पना सृष्टि की उपमाओं द्वारा समर्थित नहीं है और न ही पाश्चात्य विज्ञान की शिक्षाओं से। हम जानते हैं कि गतिविधि और विश्राम की कालावधि समस्त सृष्टि के हर एक चीज में एक दूसरे के पीछे आती है। सौर मंडल संवेद ब्रह्मांड से लेकर मनुष्य और उसकी मूल पृथ्वी तक, जिसके अपने गतिविधि के कार्यकाल के बाद विश्राम है, और संक्षिप्त में कहे तो समस्त सृष्टि उसमें जन्मे हुए जीवित रूपों के पास स्वस्थ होने का पर्याप्त समय है। वैसे ही आध्यात्मिक व्यक्तित्व मोनाड विशुद्धात्मा के साथ होता है, जो अपना चक्रीय अवरोहन और आरोहण शुरू करता है। प्रत्येक महान मनवंतरीय राउंड के बीच का कालावधि विभिन्न ग्लोब्स में व्यतीत किए हुए असंख्य जीवों को विकास करने के अनुपात में लंबे होते हैं, जबकि प्रत्येक रेस की उत्पत्ति के बीच दिया गया समय उतना पर्याप्त रूप से लंबा होता है जिससे जीवात्मा के देवाचन में पुनरुज्जीवन होने के बाद सचेत आनंद में बिताया समय किसी जीवन में बिताए संघर्ष और दुख की भरपाई करता है। चिरंतन आनंद या दुख की कल्पना करना और उसे किसी ऐसे व्यक्ति के किसी भी काल्पनिक गुणों या दोषपूर्ण कर्मों से बराबरी करना जो शायद एक सदी या एक सहस्त्राब्दी पूर्व अपने हाड़मास में जीवित रहा हो, यह केवल उसी के द्वारा प्रस्तावित किया जा सकता है जिसने अभी तक शाश्वत शब्द की गंभीरता को नहीं समझा है, न ही कर्म के नियम कर्म के नियम, परम न्याय और संतुलन के नियम पर विचार किया है जो सृष्टि में व्याप्त है। आपको और निर्देश दिए जा सकते हैं जो यह दिखाएगा कि न केवल मनुष्य बल्कि उसके अधीनस्थ जो है उनके साथ भी कितने अच्छे से न्याय किया जाता है। और मुझे आशा है कि आपके अच्छे और बुरे जटिल प्रश्न पर कुछ प्रकाश पड़ेगा। और अब मेरे लेखन के इस प्रयास को पूरा करने के लिए मैं एक पुराने ऋण को चुका सकता हूँ और पृथ्वी पर के अवतरण संबंधित आपके पुराने प्रश्न का उत्तर दूंगा। आगे मास्टर कहते हैं कि पश्चिमी विज्ञान हमें मानव जाति विज्ञान और अन्य विषयों पर क्या बताता है और पश्चिमी वैज्ञानिकों के नवीनतम निष्कर्ष के बारे में मास्टर आगे वर्णन करते हैं। एक अकेले अपवाद को छोड़कर वे सभी गलत हैं। हर बार तथ्य के वे काफी करीब आते हैं पर चूक जाते हैं। 4 नहीं बल्कि 5 प्रजातियां थी और हम चौथी प्रजातियों से बची हुई 5वीं प्रजाति है। प्रत्येक मनवंतर की परिक्रमा की अधिक विकसित प्रजाति है। फिश की थियरी के अनुसार पृथ्वी पर प्रथम प्रजाति 5 लाख वर्ष पहले नहीं बल्कि लाखों साल पहले अवतरित हुई। जर्मन और अमेरिकी प्रोफेसरों का नवीनतम वैज्ञानिक सिद्धांत फिश के माध्यम से कहता है हम पृथ्वी पर मनुष्य को लगभग आधे मिलियन वर्षों से अपनी सभी इरादों और उद्देश्य के प्रति मूक रूप से रहते हुए देखते हैं। वह सही भी है और गलत भी, ऐसा मास्टर कहते हैं। प्रथम रेस मूक थी, इस तथ्य के लिए वह सही है। संभाषण के आपसी समझबूझ और विकास के लिए उच्चतम मनुष्य सदृश प्रजाति से अलग किए हुए प्रथम मनुष्यों की कराह और बड़बड़ाहट से लेकर पहले एकाक्षर का उच्चारण करने वाले मनुष्य तक लंबे समय तक उन्हें मूक बने रहने की आवश्यकता थी, लेकिन उसका बाकी सब कुछ कहना गलत है। आगे मास्टर कहते हैं विकास योजना पर चर्चा करते समय उपयोग में लाए जाने वाले पारिभाषिक शब्दों के बारे में कुछ एग्रीमेंट होना चाहिए। हमारी शब्दावली का अनुवाद नहीं किया जा सकता और हमारी संपूर्ण प्रणाली का अच्छी तरह से ज्ञान रहे बगैर जिसे दीक्षितों के अलावा सुपुर्द नहीं किया जा सकता है। आपको कुछ भी सुनिश्चित स्पष्ट ग्रहण बोध नहीं होगा, केवल संभ्रम का कारण बनेगा, जैसे कि आपके सभी तात्विक लेखकों के साथ हुआ है। विशेष रूप से अध्यात्मवादियों के साथ सोल और स्पिरिट इन शब्दों को लेकर हुआ। सुब्बा राव के साथ आपको धैर्य रखना होगा। आप उन्हें समय दे, प्रतीक्षा करें। वे अब अपनी तपस्या में हैं और उसमें व्यवधान नहीं किया जा सकता। मैं उनसे कहूंगा कि आपको नजरअंदाज ना करें, लेकिन वे बहुत चौकस है और एक अंग्रेज को तालीम देना वे अपवित्रता के रूप में मानते हैं। थैंक यू। नमस्ते।
Thank you, Meenakshi ji, for that translation.
Thank you, Vibha ji and Meenakshi ji both. And do you think we have some time for a discussion? Anyone has a question? Have to have some clarity? Because
yes, madam. नमस्कार, मेरा प्रश्न है.
Okay.
Madam,
your voice is not audible. Your voice is not clear. If you can put it on the chat, we could read out and answer, please. Meanwhile, any other one wants to put some questions? May go ahead.
Please wait.
Okay. While we get the other questions.
So this is a very interesting letter which talks about the rounds and the races, and it talks also about the planetary pralay. That means the completion of the earth chain.
Right.
And it really sets us thinking that we have long ages to go. We have so much to evolve. It is said that with every round, one principle comes to perfection. The 7 principles are there for in human constitution. So with every round as we evolve, these principles are moving towards perfection. So there was a question from Brother Sharma ji.
Am I audible now?
I think you have 2 devices connected, so there is a little echo. If you can mute one device, then you can ask your question. Yes, please go ahead.
Or you may write it there in the chat box. We could read it and answer that. Yes.
Am I audible now?
Yeah, it's okay now. Yes, go ahead.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, you are audible. You may ask the question.
Okay, thank you. मैडम, पहला प्रश्न तो ये है कि हम 4th राउंड में हैं, 5th रूट रेस. तो 4th राउंड का मतलब ये हुआ कि हम A to D आ गए हैं, या फिर हमने A to G के 3 चक्कर लगा लिए हैं, चौथा राउंड में हम D में हैं.
बिल्कुल, आपकी ये सेकंड ऑप्शन आपका करेक्ट है. हमने A to G के 3 चक्कर लगा लिए हैं और अब हम चौथा राउंड शुरू कर चुके हैं. तो A से लेके हम D तक पहुंचे हैं अभी.
तो D में हम 5वें रूट रेस में हैं, 5th रूट रेस में.
Yes.
उसके बाद 6 में जाएंगे. तो 7 चक्कर होने के बाद जो प्रलय होगा वो क्या सोलर प्रलय कहलाएगा कि कॉस्मिक प्रलय कहलाएगा?
नहीं, वो प्लैनेटरी प्रलय है, यानी ये अर्थ चेन कंप्लीट हो जाएगी 7 राउंड्स के बाद.
अर्थ चेन कंप्लीट होने पे क्या सोलर प्लैनेटरी प्रलय बोलेंगे?
हाँ.
और जब A to G के 7 चक्कर लग जाएंगे तो सोलर प्रलय कहलाएगा?
जब 7 चक्कर लग जाएंगे तो वो प्लैनेटरी प्रलय है, केवल इस पृथ्वी का या इस अर्थ का प्रलय होगा. बाकी प्लैनेट्स का या सोलर सिस्टम का प्रलय नहीं होगा.
नहीं, जब A to G हम चक्कर लगा लेंगे 7 बार,
हाँ,
तो वो प्रलय कौन सा कहलाएगा, सोलर या कॉस्मिक?
प्लैनेटरी कहलाएगा. दैट इज नॉट सोलर प्रलय. केवल अर्थ के 7 चक्कर कंप्लीट हुए हैं तो केवल अर्थ प्लैनेटरी प्रलय के स्टेट में चला जाएगा.
नहीं वो तो हो जाएगा, पर जब हम 7 चक्कर ए बी के साथ, बी के साथ, सी के से 7 चक्कर लगा के जब जी में पहुंचेंगे तब कौन सा प्रलय होगा?
Sir, that is planetary pralay only, because we are talking only about Earth. We anywhere in the letters Mahatma Ji have not told anything about solar pralay or cosmic pralay. हम ये पीरियड ही हमें कवर करने में इतना समय लगेगा और इतना एवोल्यूशन हमें कवर करना है कि हम वो सोलर लेवल के लेवल तक तो हम पहुंच ही नहीं सकते अभी।
अच्छा, वो पावेल की किताब में पढ़ा था हमने, ए जी पावेल की किताब में। ओके, थैंक यू,
वेलकम।
मैं भी कुछ और रेफरेंस होगा इसलिए वो है, ये तो प्लानिटरी।
हाँ, इस लेटर में केवल अर्थ चेन के बारे में ही उन्होंने बात की है।
ओके,
मैंने पावेल की किताब में पढ़ी थी, उसमें से मैंने बोल दिया।
नहीं कोई नहीं, आप अपनी जगह सही है, नहीं। ओके, एनी अदर क्वेश्चन, एनीवन वांट्स टू हैव एनी अदर क्लैरिफिकेशन? कुछ कहीं पे अटका हुआ है तो यू मे आस्क और वी विल वाइंड अप इट।
Actually, these are the forums where we can really clarify our doubts and have a good discussion. क्योंकि सब पढ़ते हैं अलग अलग बुक से और हर एक के मन में कुछ अलग अलग विचार आते हैं।
फिर अंडरस्टैंडिंग भी डेवलप हो जाती है ना अलग लेवल पे सबकी, जब हम डिस्कस करते हैं तब क्लियर होता है।
करेक्ट।
Anyone else would like to say something, or I mean, it's already well explained. The letter is very explanatory.
Yes. So
Okay,
then we can close.
Yeah, we can close. And so do we do a closing prayer? Vibhaji, you may go ahead and do the prayer and we'll close it.
All right. So let us close this session with our closing prayer. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Sarvesham Swastirabhavatu Sarvesham Shantirabhavatu Sarvesham Purnam Bhavatu Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavatu Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschit Dukhabhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namaste and thank you all for joining.
Thank you all. So we are closing this session today. Okay. There is another session tomorrow, 7:30. So see you all there on the same link.